So if you have like an elephant, a long life ahead of you that you can, move around Africa with your mates and, discover a lot of territories, or, whales that go all around the planet with their friends and so on. And you can live like if you're a bowhead, no, more than 200 years. So the loss of your life is enormous, no? So why is it bad if somebody killed you today, no? Well, they will be stealing all of that life from you, and the magnitude of the loss is related to how bad it is to take that away from you. So if you have complexity and you learn things and you play games and you do other things, all of that contributes to the richness of your life. And so if you're a bowhead whale, you have more to lose from losing your life than a mosquito that was going to go around for a few more days alone with no idea that he's a mosquito, no friends, nothing. So the loss is bigger for the whale than it is for the mosquito. So I'd say that the whale has a stronger interest in being alive, in continued existence, compared to the mosquito. That just looking at the loss that dying represents for the whale. But then there are other elements. For example, if you kill a whale, or you injure a whale and all the other whales came to you. I actually come from, my mom's relatives were whalers. So as a kid, I used to go to the whaling station and see them dismember, and I also knew how they attract them. They injure one, and then all the others come to help the injured one, and that boom, 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 they kill them all. No? So of course, the loss of one is a disaster. If either of you dies, that would maybe be even worse for your parents than it would be for you. Sometimes it's worse for the parents than it is for the one that dies. So there are animals that have very strong emotional connections with others, so you also have to take into account the loss for everybody else. No? Then it is also important to take into account at least one factor that maybe if we really analyze it carefully, we'll discover that this is more than one, which is the mental connection. No? So if you are a shrimp, for example, and then you see the shrimp and you're not sure that this was the same shrimp that was in that pond before, it could be that is the descendant, the offspring. I mean, shrimps usually eat their own offspring, so it could be that the father ate the offspring and now so he lives for longer, or it could be that he didn't and that is the offspring. But you wouldn't be worrying about that. You wouldn't be worrying because the shrimp is no more connected to his future self or his past self than it is to another shrimp. So why should you worry, is this the same shrimp, if the shrimp itself doesn't have any kind of mental contiguity, has no plans for the future, doesn't remember the past, so there's nothing connecting the shrimp in 1 month and another month and another month. No? So with creatures that, in the case, stream, like especially elephants, cetaceans, and humans, great apes, and I don't know, many more animals, I'm sure many more animals we haven't discovered yet, that have a sense of self, that have plans for the future, that remember their past, that they really are connected. Then when you kill them, you're really severing this very strong and intimate connection that they have with their future self. No? When if we don't think about that, then we wouldn't be able to explain, for example, why an early miscarriage is not as bad as a late one or as the baby dying, because if we only think about the magnitude of the loss, no? How much you have to lose. So if you're a bowhead whale, you have 200 years maybe to look forward to, but within humans, if you are an early embryo, then you have more life expectancy than the later you are. So we would think that the absolute worst is to be, is to have an early miscarriage, but we don't think that. And that is because, obviously, embryos are a bit like shrimp. No, they don't have plans. They don't have a sense of themselves. I'm going to go there with my friend and do this and that. No, so, but, children do. So children already live mentally in their future. They're planning to be a doctor or a policeman or something. They are making an effort with their education for something that happens tomorrow. So to kill a child that already has all these plans and is an investment, it is terrible. It's like somebody expressed it like it's a bridge that ends in mid-air. It's going somewhere and then you cut it there. So there are many differences between different animals that affect how bad it is for them to die. And that's why we should focus on how bad it is for this animal or this other animal to die, rather than think about moral importance, because other interests that animals have nothing to do with their interest in continued existence. No? For example, any animal that lives in a forest that can be on fire would have a nervous system that causes us to remove the hand quickly when something is very hot, not to get burned. And then if we burn in that fire, that is extremely painful for us because we have evolved. And then look at two mammals that live in that forest and would have fur that gets caught with fire, as it happens. It happens, for example, with orangutans when the palm oil producers set the rainforest on fire to then produce palm oil. Their furry bodies catch fire, and it's a horrible death of being burned alive. And then, so if we know that that is the reason why we have that system and that nervous system, that fire and burning causes us a lot of pain, there's no difference. Probably all of mammals that live in a forest that can catch fire have very similar reaction and pain to being burned alive. So why would we think that one burning is worse than the other if the nervous system and so mechanism is very similar? So we should say, well, we're all equally interested in not burning, but we wouldn't say that we're all equally interested in continued existence, because that depends, for example, on life expectancy, on emotional connection to others, on capacity for planning and the unity of the self and other things. No? The same goes for other interests that we might have, like freedom. No? So there are some animals that do have a sense of what they want to do. They have plans, they have ambitions, they are going somewhere, and then you interfere with them, and they carry on insisting. Sometimes their paws bleed, and they carry on insisting on liberating themselves, on going, and they really have a plan that you are frustrating. There would be other animals that you put them on a pond, they cannot distinguish the pond where they are captive, where the pond where they live. They swim, and when they get to the end of a pond, they see it as it for the very first time, because they have very limited memory, so they've forgotten they've been there before. So, and they don't have the capacity for imagination that we have, that we can be on a cage and thinking, I was in the rainforest with my family, we were going somewhere, and then somebody put me in a cage, and here I am in this stupid zoo, blah, blah, blah. And they have a sense of what it's like to have a different life, to be elsewhere, to be doing something else. And so for them, they have a complaint and a grudge that they have, they're captive, that maybe for other animals doesn't make sense, no? So, the same happens with solitude, no? Some fish apparently don't feel lonely in the tank. In fact, their welfare is higher if you don't give them company, because the others for them are always like territorial competitors or something. And so they're actually going to be more nervous. While if they are alone, they are they have evolved to be solitary creatures and they don't feel alone. No? So it all depends on the kind of animal you are, that you would have an interest on some things and not an interest in others. And that's what we should be talking about, how bad it is to do very specific things to very specific animals, rather than be talking about who is more important or less important, because I don't think that phrase has very much meaning at all.
Right. And I guess that was a great way to wrap it up. I was just about to say something very similar, just to clarify. Like you think it's not useful to think of it in a very broad, general sense of relative moral importance to each other, but rather at the species level, thinking about the vividness of their particular experience and the consequences of X thing happening to them. Like if X thing happens to this species, would they experience something negative? Like that in your opinion would be the better mindset, the more productive mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my
Okay.
students an example that they relate to, because it is the plot of many movies, especially American movies. So at the beginning of the movie, they are attacked by the evil enemy, and somebody loses his legs or something, and his loved ones, and he's like going mental and he's suffering a lot. So all the Marines or the other heroes of the movie, they put up with their own pain, and they give all the painkillers or the whiskey or whatever they have to the most seriously injured soldier. Now, at the end of the movie, when they cannot all fit into the rescue helicopter, or somebody has to stay behind to detonate the bomb that is gonna make the bridge collapse just as the Nazis are crossing, or something like that, he is always the guy who volunteers and says, look at me, my life is terrible. I have only suffering to look forward to. I'm old, whatever. Your life is more valuable. So I had total priority in respect to suffering avoidance, but I shouldn't have total priority in respect to continued existence, because I have less to lose if I lose my life compared to you. So he's the one who volunteers to do it, and that shows that priority in respect to suffering and priority in respect to life saving are very different things. And although there are many examples in medical ethics that show that we as a society, we have laws that recognize this, for example, in pregnancy, no? So mothers would go through, a lot of pain to save the fetus, a remote chance of a small discomfort. They will go through a lot of pain, no? So it's like absolute priority. But if you can only save one life, the fetus of the mom, of course you save the mom, no? And there are lots of other examples in medical ethics that show that, they do come apart. So if they do come apart, well, keep on talking about like a hierarchy of moral status or some creatures being more important than others, when we should be more precise and think about how bad it is to do this specific thing to this specific creature, and not try to generalize it, because we know, as in the example of the soldier, is priority in respect to suffering avoidance and in respect to your interest in continued existence. They don't have to come together. They can in fact come apart in a sort of diametric way. The more suffering, the more priority in respect to, painkillers. And, with elderly people, that's what happens. No, we want to avoid people who are very old, even some very small pain if we want to. And maybe when we're younger, we just don't care about the pain in the same way. But elderly people, for them, pain is a big deal. But if you can only save one life, or some people are so old and they have so many problems already that their life is not very valuable. So it's not as we value elderly people less, no, because we might give them all the painkillers, no, and suffer the pain ourselves. So it's not for all decisions that we rank individuals in a way and we put them in that ranking and we don't move them. No, we move them all the time depending on what the issue is. So why treat animals differently? We should look at each individual animal and what we know from biology about how much pain they suffer when burned, when being squeezed, when being put into something that is boiling, or all kinds of things, which is very different because the there's no fire in the ocean, for example, so they wouldn't have the same reaction to fire, but they would have maybe a lot of sensitivity to being squeezed, no, or other things. And then we should act according to these more refined principles that have to do with the wrongness of doing something specific to a specific creature.
Right. Okay. So I guess after narrowing it down, then let's say, for example, like cows. I think this is a good example just because of like, factory farming and whatnot. If we say, okay, cows, their natural behaviors, they like to graze, they need wide open spaces, they don't like to be confined, they have social relationships, they feel pain. The way that they're slaughtered is incredibly inhumane. If we tell this to people, like it seems pretty obvious to me at least we should be like, okay, well, let's stop doing that then. But for the majority, for a large portion of the population, they're just not going to care. And so I like a lot of this is just tied to like how useful the product of cows and beef are to them, like think it's whether they think it just tastes good or if there's nutritional value there, or whether they just can't afford other options. I know there's a lot to consider here, but like I guess how do we sell that point to people to where they're actually going to care and make changes in their lives?
Mm-hmm. Well, what we were talking before about the issue of John Stuart Mill talking about how bad it is for society to have a sexist ideology. I think that's what we have to do, to explain to people all the many, many bad things that are happening generally that are related to the evil of factory farming cows. I mean, it's a disaster for climate change. It's not even good for people's health to be eating so much meat. And I know that there are some people who just want to emphasize that it's bad for the cows. And of course it's bad for the cows, and that should be enough. But if you're realistic, it is not enough for a lot of people. So I think we need to emphasize, all of the different reasons why it is a disaster to have factory farming cows.
Sure. So just really combining all of the reasons, not just the ethical ones, and maybe in a way that doesn't seem like judgmental. Like no matter what they decide, we're not gonna judge them either way. Because I've noticed people don't like to feel judged, obviously, or feel like they're being told what to do. And so like maybe that's the key, just relaying everything that you just mentioned in a way that's like, okay, we're just giving you the information. Choose to do with it what you please.
I know that there are some philosophers who think about this, for example, because they see that it's part of the importance of feminism to say if something is bad for women, that's enough. You don't have to say that it's also bad for men, or if something is bad for animals, that's enough. And that's part of what we want to achieve, a society where pointing at something being bad for a group, that should be enough. And they also are studying what motivates people. But I don't think that I am the best person to ask, because I am not a psychologist or a social psychologist, and I don't know why people, I mean, it's so easy to give up beef. I don't understand why people are so fixated. I have read a lot of different studies, maybe other people who have done interviews and statistics, and it's like, sometimes there's a macho element into the meat eating, sometimes there are wrong beliefs about what is good for their health, sometimes it's just tradition, sometimes it's fitting in, sometimes, it could be a lot of reasons, but it's not my field to give you like a sort of systematic account of how many people are moved by this or the other, because I haven't done this. It's not, really what I work on, what moral motivation and how to move people. I wish I knew, but all of the studies I've read are quite inconclusive, and there's always some people are moved by this, and some people, are moved by this other thing. I mean, when I work in ICREA, sometimes I have noticed other people had ordered vegan meals, and it turns out that they weren't morally motivated. Some of the scientists are very worried about plastic into that goes into fish, for example. They don't want to eat more plastic than we're already consuming. So that is for them what moved them. No, I didn't expect that for somebody to become vegan as a result of fear of plastic, but it does happen. And it would be interesting to have a study of why, why people are still eating it, or why people have given up. That would be an interesting research, but it would be a social scientific research, so not something that I should be doing as a philosopher, because I probably won't do it right.
Yeah, I definitely strayed from philosophy with these past few questions. So thank you for entertaining them, and I appreciate all of your insights. That attitude of focusing on the species and how each individual is specifically affected by certain actions, I'll definitely take forward in my career. So thank you.